Welcome back. So this video is Clint Sodowsky's car. If you're a fan of Rocky Mountain Race Week is mostly his gig. He used to do Drag Week. I'm not sure he has in a while. Do you remember?
No, he hasn't.
Hasn't done Drag Week in a while. He's a Rocky Mountain Race Week guy and Sick Week. So we're kind of in the middle of Clint's roll cage upgrade. This car, when he bought it, was an 850 Cert, which is spec Cert or whatever they call it, not a SFI, but a NHRA Cert. So it's pretty simple. 850 Cert doesn't require a whole cage with a funny car cage and what have you. But that's what it was originally. It's made out of mild steel tubing. And you can see up here, look at this right here. Crazy. For the people that don't know, come around here. So the difference between mild steel, look how thick that is. You know, that's a very thick piece of tubing. Now look down here. This is what I added a couple years ago. See the difference in the wall thickness of that versus that? So it makes a huge difference in weight. So what we did a couple years ago, it had the main hoop and the forward bars and the dash bar, but everything was mild steel. And at 750 and slower, you can mix, so you can have mild steel and chrome moly. So he wanted me to make it a 750 Cert. So all I had to do was add the funny car cage, X the doors. It had one diagonal, and I X'd it and did the inner frame rails underneath the floor. I put quite a bit of tubing under there, inner and outer frame rails they call it. So there's a chromoly tube that runs from back to front on each side, and then one down by the drive shaft tunnel. So it's got inner and outer frame rails. Anyway, I just took his 850 Cert and made 750 Cert out of it. That's as fast as you can go with mild steel, period. You're allowed to mix it up to 750, but so to go faster than 750, you have to have all chrome moly. It has to all be TIG welded. A lot of his was MIG welded, you know, the original stuff. So now he's going faster. It's an LS car. He's putting a really, really nice billet LS from Ace Racing engines in it. So it's a Noonan billet, dry decked block, really nice motor. He's going from a Power Glide to a Turbo 400, so it'll be a 3-speed. And upgrading the rear axles and all of that. So I'm building a complete new cage, and he had already cut all the original stuff out except a bunch of junk up here that's behind the dash. You can look right here, you can see you have to have dash bars. So whoever did this put all this big chunky 1 3/4 mild steel behind the dash. You can see all this over here. So boy, it looks really ugly too. Look at the welds on that. But anyway, that's part of it. He's cut, see down here on the floor, you can see it on both sides. It comes out of a plate here, comes back like this. It's aiming this direction. So that was his door diagonal. And then it goes up and comes up here, and it went to the main cage and had a crossbar. Well, I've got to put all that back in. But in order to do that, what I'm doing right here, I just drilled all the spot welds out of the dash. Somebody has put this in here before, and it was, you know, they did the same thing. They had holes drilled in it and they welded it. So I'm drilling all the spot welds out. I'm going to cut the brackets off, which here's one right here that holds the corner of the dash. That's something that you can tell somebody's cobbled on here, like right. Let me get that light off of it right here. So they welded to the dash, welded to there. There's stuff down inside that crack, and then you got all your steering column. So I'm going to take this whole front of this dash off, cut all this front tubing out, and I've got a little bit of a job because it actually goes out to his frame. Let me see here. One of these bars comes out and connects right here. So that part's not a concern by the NHRA. They don't care pretty much anything forward of the firewall. This is all, doesn't have to fall in spec for what we're doing. This is going to be a 25.3 Cert or cage, which will allow this car at its weight to go 6.0. You can go 650 up to 3,200 pounds, I think it is. And let me think about that. How do I say that? 3,200 and less, you can go 6.0. 3,200 and more is 650. So he's supposed to come in at less than 3,200 pounds is his goal. So same cage, same chassis, same cert, except they click when they punch the hole in the tag, it'll be 6.0 or 650. So it depends on the weight of the car. So he's planning on going with that 25.3. He actually isn't planning on it, but we're going to do it. So say he comes in at 3,100 pounds, he can go 6.0 in this car, which is as fast as a door car cert as you can get. You guys will probably tear me up on that. So they have a red tag, I think they call it, that you can add to a 6.0 cert and make it faster. I don't know anything about it. I just know that it exists. But the fastest actual cert is a 6.0 for a door car. So you can add tags through the NHRA somehow. But I've got to get all this stuff cut off here. And I've already done this. And it looks a little bit funny. You might notice that it's leaning back. But when the quarter window's rolled up, the quarter window slants exactly the same as the roll cage does. His original roll cage went straight up. Clint's like, how tall is Clint? 6'3"?
He's taller than you, so I'm not...
He's probably 6'3"-ish, I would imagine. A Camaro is tight for me at 6'1". So Clint's hoping what we're going to do is his seat has to be here in the stock location, but he can, like, you know, adjust the slider and slide it back. That's what we're going to do, slide it back as much as possible and be able to lean it back a little bit so he can try to get comfortable in the car. The way it was, he had to squeeze in, and I've done that. My Nova is kind of the same way. You have to squeeze into the car. It's uncomfortable, but the really scary part is if you have a bad accident at 200 miles an hour, your head's going to hit the roof or the top bars in your funny car cage, and it's just dangerous to be, you know, squeezed in a car that tight. You don't even have room for padding. So we're trying to make that better, but right now I'm drilling those holes out in the dash, and I'm getting ready to take the front of the dash off, and I'm going to get after cutting all that stuff out. This is inch and 5/8 083 chrome moly, and it's kind of cool. Come over this direction. Let me take this pad out here. So this is all basically the way it was. I think my bars are bent better, but this goes down and ties to the inner frame rails. This ties to the outer frame rails. This back here, you see all these holes. His original cage had bars that crisscrossed right here. They X'd. So this upper corner here went through that hole and tied into the rear cross member, which is just behind this bulkhead here, firewall. And then it also had bars that came off and went down through these holes. So it was really crossed up and X'd back there. Well, you don't have to have that. So there's multiple different ways to do it. NHRA does care about from this main bar back. These bars that you see up here are required. They're mandatory for this cert, but they don't have to X. And as long as you use inch and 5/8 tubing, you can have two bars of any length, the book says. So I put these in to where he can put a back seat if he wants, and I don't think he will want to. He didn't say anything about that. But the beauty is he could put a piece of plywood back here and put some carpet or something over it, and then he's got storage. He couldn't get to that before, the way the cage was with all the bars. So on a 850 cert, you have a bar that goes from side to side right here. Something flying in my face there. So you have a bar that goes from side to side. It makes it really hard to get in and out of. The funny car cage is going to have, this is my next thing after I do this, it'll have a bar that comes here and goes down. So the driver is encapsulated in this funny car cage, but that side can be open. So the way I'm doing this, he'll be able to put a piece of plywood there or whatever, aluminum, carbon fiber, whatever he wants to do. Nothing. He doesn't have to put anything if he doesn't want to, but he can access that through the passenger door. So he just gained a ton of room. And when you're on a drag and drive, on a drag car, that doesn't matter, but we're in the drag and drive world, and that's what Clint does with this car. He's gone 17s in it, I don't know, 715 or something before, and now he's planning on going 6s. So that gave him room. He can put his laptop back there, you know, you can have your passenger, you can throw your duffel bag back there, you can do a lot of stuff. He doesn't even know that's what we're doing yet. He's used to all this jungle gym of bars. They're everywhere the way it was. So I got all this bin up and put in, and Nick actually came in this morning and welded it up for me. It's beautiful. Look right here. Let me grab this camera. Get that to focus. Come on. Focus. There you go. Hocus pocus focus, phone. So right there. Nick did all this tigging for it this morning. It's like Nick likes to lay in and get in all these odd positions, and I've done it a lot myself. I normally do it myself, but I said something to Nick about helping, and while he was doing the TIG work, I was able to wash my truck. You gotta look at that. So he came back from Indianapolis just grimy, and Nick used the hot water pressure washer and washed his truck day before yesterday, night before last. This morning I'm sitting in my chair, and this was parked here, and it was white, just covered with road grime. I thought, you know what, my truck got in salt too. I need to get that off of there. But it was so dirty, I had to hand wash it. It takes, 2 hours probably to hand wash this thing, because I hand wash the roof, I do inside the doors, all up under the fenders. But he's back, so he's in good shape, good and clean. So Debbie and I are going to go Christmas shopping tomorrow and take the Black Beauty. And look, cab over's all happy in its spot.
Now they're 55.
55's next on the list, which I can't stand it. I got to get that on the lift and get some work done so we can go to sick week. But that's where we're at. So look at also the bars in the back are welded to 6x6 1/8" plate. That's by code, by the book. So that gives it doesn't take up any room in the trunk. So that makes it legal, instead of having bars at X and take up all your trunk and are just in the way. So that's where we're at. I'm getting ready to get that stuff out of the dash, get all those tubes cut out. Clint cut the biggest part of it out, and then I'm going to start doing the funny car cage, and I'll start doing my forward down bars. Last thing I do is the door X bars, because I got to crawl in and out of this thing so much. I X the doors the very last thing. So I don't want to show you all the tubing, bending, and stuff that goes with it. It's just pretty boring. That heater's pretty loud. But, I've got my own set up with my tubing bender, and it works really well. I made this piece. So this is just a JD square bender, and I made the hydraulic setup. I made this bulkhead thing here that I machined it in the lathe, and kind of hard to see. In fact, I have to think about how I did it. But it's split right there. It was one plate, and I split it, made it the right diameter, and when you tighten this bolt up, this countersunk in here, it squeezes this around the cylinder, and then it pivots right there. So, in fact, I think I can take this out. See how that pivots? That's all made into the block. I just machined it into it, and I bolted this piece on just to keep it from possibly shoving the cylinder out the back. But that's, again, like everything else I do, that's all homemade. And I made this stand, and I usually work by myself. So when I've got a big, long piece of tubing, like a main hoop, that thing's 10 foot long. It's typically about a 10-foot piece. I can swing this around and put my tubing. In fact, I'll show you. It works pretty good. This is 1 5/8 083 chrome moly. I can put this in here, and it'll lay here on my stand, and it works really well. When I lay I'm on my other side of my bend of my roll cage, so I'll have this coming out and bent down this way. I can swing this any direction I want, all the way around all the way around the bender. It'll make a complete circle. So any direction I need it. If the tube's sticking out this way from the bending dies, I can put it over here. But I put it, you know, I machined this stuff. I've got grease fittings in it. So all of this spins very easy. It's all pretty precision. When I'm not using it, I take this off with a bolt. I stick it on that stud, and that's how I store it. Looks like a tree. So this thing works exceptionally well. I can't imagine not having it. And then I've got a stand right here that if I've got a big long tube, like if I've got a 20-foot tube, I don't want to cut it, because a lot of times I'll cut, if I know I need 5 foot, I'll cut it 5.5 foot, just so I know I've got enough. Well, you're wasting 6 or more inches. So, you know, I might want a whole 20-foot stick in this thing. So that's the same level as this. I can put a big long piece of tubing in here and do it myself. We don't have anybody here to hold it. So that's my bender. Of course, I got the bandsaws. My tubing notcher, a lot of you guys haven't seen this. My people that follow me on Facebook have, but this is just an old lathe that I started out with many years ago. I dug it out of storage one day because I wanted a tubing notcher like the nice high dollar tubing notchers, but I didn't want to pay for it. So I just made this gizmo, which I've got different sizes. I can spin this around, put a different shoe in it, and notch like whatever 1-inch tubing with that. Or here I can notch 1.5 inches, 1 5/8, and it's not as great as a high dollar Mittler Brothers or something, but it works pretty good. So I like it. It makes my life a lot easier. So I get a decent notch. I'll do that, and then I'll come over here to, as you've heard me say before, my favorite tools. Don't get onto me for no safety glasses. I always have my glasses on, but I'm doing this just spur of the moment. So once I do that, I've got a good notch that it doesn't take but a second, and I can adjust the angle. You rarely want a straight notch, but all I've got to do to adjust the angle, use a 15/16 inch, spin that to where I want, tighten it back down. These handles are backwards. My blade that I use all the time, this is over here. It's really weird feeling. So I just slide it in like that, and then I can cut that notch at an angle. So that's my homemade tubing notcher. It lays doing no good otherwise. It's way bigger than you need. You could cut the rest of this lathe off. But what I do with it is I'll take and put tubing in it, and I'll just go down through there with a 180 piece of sandpaper and just buff all the black off. That's what this is, an old piece that's been laying here, and it's rusty right now. But you know, to get rid of the black so you can weld the mill scale, it just takes just one little wipe with a piece of 180 sandpaper, and that tubing will be nice and shiny. So that's where we're at. I'm working on Clint's cage. We'll come back and I'll keep you up to date on the rest of the bars that are going in there, and that'll be over the course of the next week, because it's a huge amount of work. There's so much fitting, tubing, and notching, and bending, and welding in there that it just takes a long time. It took Nick, just on the 2, 4, 6, 8 welds I think he did this morning, took probably 2 hours or 2.5 hours maybe, I'm not sure. The welding is precise and time consuming. So I'll do some, what do you call it? Slow motion stuff. Time lapse.
Time lapse.
We'll do some time lapse stuff on it, and you can come along as we progress this steel body 68 Camaro into a 6-second street car. You know how big a deal that is? 6 seconds, 200 plus miles an hour in a steel body car. That, you know, back when I was a kid, that was, if you went 10s, you were somebody. Now we're going 6s. That's crazy. Okay, so I drilled all these spot welds out, and I thought maybe they replaced the whole dash, but as I started cutting the braces out, these upper welds, they were add-on, at least that side over there. It was done kind of like they do from the factory, but you can see that weld's not original. For some reason they had that cut out, and I guess it was to put that bar in. But now that it's cut out, I can see what I like. Look right here. You can see the rust. So the original top of the dash was rusted out in the window like so many of them are. It's just kind of standard. So what they've done is they replaced this top. This is a reproduction piece. This had never been cut out because I cut these brackets out. I cut them for the first time they've ever been cut. But you can see, look at this big, the forward down bar runs to here. It used to run, and it's not one piece. It welded into this, which you can get by with this stuff on an 850, but it ran down like this, back up and to the main hoop. Then their dash bar crosses. Then they've got this kicker going out to their front subframe. But this big bar is welded in, kind of welded in from side to side. And then they had this bracket for their ECU. And I don't know what all this is. Some reason that's cut. He probably cut that when he was taking it, all this stuff out of here. But all that's MIG welded, you can see. That's going to be all cut out. That's where I'm going next. I've got a bunch of tubes to cut out right here. But what that does for me now is I can replace it. You got to have the dash bar. And I don't know exactly where I'll put it. Probably not in that same place. I'll probably bring it back further, like about where my flashlight is here. So I'm going to make my forward down bar. The beauty of this is now this is wide open. So the worst thing in a roll cage is when people bring the bar behind the dash and it's down here on the floor like this, and it comes up. Getting in and out of these things is already hard enough, but when this bar that's way up here is back here behind the dash, not only does it look bad, it's miserable to get in and out. So I got all this stuff cut out up here. I think you saw that. I think we did a slow motion of that. But these 4 pipes that go out the front, tubes, they're not required by NHRA spec. So what I'm going to do, instead of going all the way out and rebuilding his whole front suspension, I'm going to add on to these tubes. So you saw before that they joined back into here. They were really weird. They did a lot of weird stuff. So I'm just going to simply come into here and into here, and then the Dorex bars will come out of here. So it'll be very strong. All of these bars are pretty much in compression. So the weight of the car sits and it wants to push that front subframe up. Well, that's just pushing back into here. So this is the upper bar that goes out. It's bent really funky through this cowl, and I don't want to have to redo that, and there's no need to. So that pushes the weight of the car, or say if it wheelies, which this car does, it's a ladder bar car, and when it comes down, that tries to compress. So I can add on to these. It's legal and it's safe. I'll make a sleeve to fit inside of them and weld it back together, but I'm just going to come into here. So this is going to tie here. This one will tie here. The X bar will come from here down, and then one from here up. So it becomes very strong. But I'm just pointing out that instead of going through all the hassles, in fact, these lower bars I can see out front where they've already been cut and spliced once before. But it's all compression, so it doesn't hurt anything. It's not required by NHRA. They only care about from this bar back. Now these upper bars are required, and these are done to spec. So over the weekend, Saturday, my neighbor over here wanted to watch a tube being bent, and I was needing to bend a tube anyway, so I sat with him and we built this bar here. This is really a pretty complicated piece. It's not welded in yet. I'm getting ready to take it out, and you and I are going to build another one of these. We're going to duplicate it. You don't need to see or don't want to see the whole process. It just takes too much. But to duplicate a bar like this is tough enough. To bend the first one's really tough. So we got this one bent. It's notched. It's ready to go in. You can see up here, maybe. Let me get a flashlight and see if you can.
We can see.
Does that help or hurt?
Well, that right there helps.
Okay, so see how tight that fits? You could pour water in this tube and it wouldn't run out of that.
Okay, maybe you're light now.
I mean,
There you go.
it's seriously a perfect fit. So that's going to sit there. It runs with the roof. It's up as high as it can go. There'll be room once this is positioned down here. I don't want to move it. For a headliner in here, it only has to slip in there. It's pretty much in his notch on his dash from the original tubes, and the original tubes were so janky, for the lack of a better word, that these notches are very big. So there's no way to make them fit perfectly, and he'll just have to weld some sheet metal back in here if he wants to tighten it up. I don't even remember what the original tubes looked like because he had them cut off, but they were really bent strangely. This one's pretty much a straight shot down to the plate on the floor. So this is also like that up there. It fits so tight that
Turn your light off.
water almost wouldn't run out of that. So I've got just enough room. I can get behind it with my Furic cup on my TIG, or actually Nick's probably going to weld it, and weld it all the way around. These will be spliced in, and I think we can get in here and get most of that welded around. Like I say, that's on compression, so it really isn't that big of a deal. This runs pretty much with the angle of the windshield. So when I'm building a cage, aesthetics are important. It's just tack. But you see the bar runs pretty much with the window. It's a little bit out up here because I don't want it to be, it's hitting the cowl here, and I don't want it to be in because I want it to be as tight to the outside as possible. It runs about the same angle. It's almost hidden. If you're from the side of the car, in fact, here's a good example right here. If you're looking at that A-pillar, you don't see the bar. It's gone. So that's the way that I think a cage should look. Now, once the dash is welded back in, you won't see any of this. So this will all disappear. So this bar is not in your way to get in and out of the car. Of course, there'll be an X bar here. We'll have a tube here and a tube here. I typically put my lower X like this. I don't like it when I see some of them, boy, it just cringes me to think that people put the X bar way up here. We're going to come down about like this because they're hard to get in and out of. The funny car cage doesn't help any. So Clint was here and we put the seat in, and the way I've got his bar, it's welded the same place on the floor as it was before, but I've gained him about 5 inches of room up top. The thing about that is most cages stand straight up. They run them with the back of the door. I lean this one back and the seat leans back. So we're able to scoot his seat back 3 inches, maybe even 4 if he wants to. He'll do that himself. But I have to get, his helmet has to be inside the funny car cage. So I needed to position him in there. But it's going to be one of the roomiest Camaros in stock location. The seats will be in stock location that I've ever seen. And it's just from leaning that back. So what we're going to do now is bend this other bar. I'm going to take this one out. And we're going to duplicate it. And see, you've got this bend, which is just a simple bend. But if you look at it from this angle, it gets pretty complicated, and it's real easy to jank one of these things up and not make it right. I'm pretty good. I'm pretty fortunate with that. I have done it, and these become my patterns when I mess them up. And I'm going to show you how I determine this twist here without scanning and all the high-tech stuff that some people do. I'm not going to scan anything. I don't use a lot of fancy tools. But one of the ways I do it is I keep a lot of scrap tube around. Not a lot. I don't have a lot of scrap tube. So I have a pattern that gives me measurements. That's a 90-degree. I know where my dies are marked on here. I have a little piece like this that a lot of times that'll work, you know, to kind of simulate in the car what you're wanting. But the most important part to get this twist, I'll take something like this, and this is so kind of like this. You see right there, that kind of matches that. So I'll hold, or have somebody help me hold this up in the car. That's the roof, there's the window, and then I'll just weld this piece, I'll mark it actually. You can see where I've marked, and I actually moved it a little bit more than my mark because I did this twice. And I'll tack it together. Once I get it tacked together, then I can come back in my bender. And I'm not going to go through opening this thing up. Let me see, maybe I can do that a little bit. When this is in the bender, I can put a digital level on here. And this is how we will duplicate the bar. So this will tell me kind of the angle that I want. And when I put my real tube in there, I'll twist it down and get that same angle. So we're going to do that again, but that instead of risking ruining an expensive piece of chromoly tube, I just keep, this is a piece of 1 3/4. This was off of some, I don't even know what, a cage kit. Maybe years ago when I did that. Well, I don't like mild steel tubing. That's so heavy and so big. But it's just a piece of tubing that was laying around, and that's actually a piece of 1 5/8 that I use. I can cut that off and reuse it for a different one. I've got pieces laying all over. See, there's an end with just a cope in it, and I just tack it together to get the angles. So I'll just use scrap tubing, tack it together to get the first one and make sure it fits. And once it fits, I can duplicate it in the machine. What we're getting ready to do right now is make the other side. So if I've got, say, 24 degrees down out here, my other one's gonna have to be 24 degrees up. You gotta remember these things. But let's cut a piece of tubing and get started. Okay, so I got a piece of 1 5/8 loaded in the saw. I'm gonna cut it 80 inches long. Let's whack it. Coolant. You know what? I bet it was right there. Let me check real quick before we. My coolant wasn't flowing. There we go. Got turned off. I didn't want to stop it in the middle of a cut, but I accidentally bumped the coolant, turned it off. So what I'm going to do here, this piece has gotten kind of rusty. Okay, you can stop. Okay. So we're going to make our first, let's see. All right, right here on this tube, I measured from the end to my die, 29 inches. I always write it on the tube. So when I put this in the, let's go ahead and review what I do here before I put that new piece in. When I bent this one, I measured, and I'm going to show you where I measured from and to. Let me get my tape measure so I make it right. This is how we're going to duplicate this pipe tube. Okay, see my mark here? I always mark the end of the die. I'm going to pull this pin so I can swing it out. I actually mark both the end and the rotation. It's kind of worn off because I've been handling it, but it would look like that. And what that does is it puts it back in the die in exactly the same place. If in the event that I need to, I measure and mark every one. So this says 29 inches. So this is where I started. From here to here was 29 inches. So now, in order to make this the same as the other one, what did I say my measurement was? 4 inches, I think. Look on that pipe right there on top. You can show the camera. You say 29 and 4, I think.
Yeah, 4 inches.
Okay, so what 4 inches means is I got to go one whole die. 4 inches, that's 4 inches of ram instead of using a degree wheel, which the problem with that is if it comes loose, and it does, you're just have no idea where you're at. Look right here. I actually use the paint. So that should, in theory, be the same as that one. If I went back and bent it more or possibly even unbent it just a little bit, yeah, I can unbend with my other tubing machine over there. It could be just a little bit wrong, but the point is that it started out exactly like this. Yeah, I unbent it. I do remember doing that. So I should have thought about that, but I can unbend this just a little bit and be good. It actually lays this way. But I bent this and did that 4 inches, then I unbent it just a little bit. So now the trick, I'll deal with that later. The next one, this one's a little bit harder. So the way I'm going to duplicate this now is I've got a mark on here, and I just made it the same. You see, I put a mark on the new tube down here to match this tube, the other side. And I've got notes here, 16 1/4 inches from here to where I'm going to put my die. This is where the end of the die was before, so I just made a mark here, 16 1/4 inches. Now, this is, as you can see, it's not straight. So I also have a note that I've rotated 27 degrees with my digital angle gauge here. So the one that we've already bent angles down like this, 27 degrees. I'm gonna put this on here, put it right up to that mark that I just made. Right there. Now, the old one, the other one, right there would be 27 degrees, but I want it this direction. So I'm going to lightly tighten this bolt. I'm going to take this That's 24 degrees. Let's rotate it a little bit more. 27.2. So now that should be the opposite of the one that we already have. So just to double check, this one would be in here like this when it was bent, and see this one, it's going to bend right here around this die. This one's aiming down 27 degrees. This one's going to be aiming up 27 for the other side of the car. So let's go with that. And we have 13 3/4 inches of ram. Okay, 13 3/4. So ideally, that's right. So let's back it off. But before I do, I'm going to make a mark on my shoe. You would think, it's going to fit right back in there. It doesn't matter. It can't fit any other way. It's not really using that much of that shoe or that die. So yeah, it could, when you put it back in, I can prove that I can twist it just a little bit either way. So I just make that mark to make it where I know where it's supposed to be. Okay, now if I was in the car on the passenger side, that would be going back to the roll bar, down the window, and to the floor. So it should be the opposite of this. So there it is, pretty much. That's exactly opposite. I got to cut several inches off of that end. But that's the opposite tube of that one. So I'll go over there and I'll probably go ahead and whack a few inches off of it just because I know that it's going to require that. I'm going to take that much off to start with, and then we'll go up. It's only a 1/2 inch long in the back. If I leave that much on, it's not going to fit in the car worth even messing with. So let's cut this one off, and then we'll try fitting it in the car. I'm gonna make a mark with one hand, hold the tube with the other. It's always better if you got somebody to help hold the tubes. My holder is preoccupied with the camera today. This is really the hardest one. So I'm gonna notch that. Let's go back there. I know what I want, you may not. So I'm gonna try to remember it as I go back here. So I'm going to come up here. I'm going to go around to start with because we're just going to do it the first time just to see that we got everything right. It's going to angle back this way. So once I get that notch where it'll sit, that represents the flat top part of the plate. So that would sit kind of like that on top of the plate. And from those, I'm going to make a point come down where it's going to sit on the angle of the plate. So the way I'm going to do this is I'm going to cheat and use the sander. Most people would use this tool or the bandsaw. The reason I didn't use a bandsaw is because this chromoly is rough on bandsaw blades, and if I can make a bandsaw blade last longer, I'm going to. So that's just a rough idea. Now I'm going to use that same belt sander, but see, that's got the angle, kind of the angle of the plate. I guarantee it's not exactly right, but sometimes it surprises me. So that's going to set up on the flat part, but this part's going to hang off on the angle that's going down on that plate. So let's grind this with the belt sander. I'm not going to get too carried away with making it perfect, even though that looks goofy. It is a goofy cut. That's why I didn't use a saw. Okay, I don't know if you can see that. That's perfectly tight around the back. You couldn't put a credit card in there. Not that it's exactly right, because I don't know what's going on up here. And I got to cut the whole thing up. So other than that right there where it's flat, because I didn't grind that much, it fits pretty good everywhere. So it's exceptionally nice right there. It's probably just too long. So how I'm going to cut this angle, I'm going to guess. So if my pipe was right here, tube, I know it's a tube. I'm going to make a mark right here and right here. And what I'm doing is, if you were looking where the tube sits and you drew a straight line through there, kind of like I'm doing right here, and you transferred that to this tube, that's the rotation that I want. And I want, it's showing, you know, right now it looks like it's 2 inches too long, but it's not. It's got to go forward. I know you won't have the same exact thing, but what I'm doing is just putting those marks kind of in line with my cutter. You can see this one over here. Look on this side. So see, that kind of runs into the center of that. And there's no way that it's, yeah, that's pretty much dead nuts on. I was going to say there's no way it's right, because this side's right. And I just made those one-handed up there on the roof deal with it. There, because I can always cut twice. Now the same as my bender over there, I'm going to make a mark on here, because you can definitely twist that tube a little bit different when you come back, so re-notch that. So we've got both ends kind of cut, but we know that it's too long. But that notch is, it's loose back here, it's loose at the back, it's tight at the front. But see how that's got to twist out? So if I could twist that out, that would fall pretty much right in line. So we're sneaking up on it. That's still, ouch, that's still hot. All I did was I moved my mark up 1 inch, and I made that mark, and then this time I cut it with a cutoff wheel. I had to have Debbie hold it so she didn't record it. But I cut it off with a cutoff wheel, and then I just ground it at that angle. So let's see how it fits now. We're sneaking up on it. So this is just part of the process of dialing these tubes in. Maybe somebody that knows more could cut it in one piece. Look at that. That actually, okay, so that's, holy cow. I didn't even deburr that. You can see that's a pretty good fit. So that's a good fit. And let's look at this one down here. That's tight all the way around. And that's just a guess. So that's what you like. But I'm going to put the other tube back in. Now I can start comparing. I'm pretty sure I've got to go back further, but let's get the other tube back in. I measured from the die mark down to the bottom, and I cut the other one the same. So instead of just messing around with it 52 times, I went ahead and did it by this tube, because because I could tell they were going to be very close to this. I'm going to go ahead and tack them in so we can get a dash bar. And then I'm going to edit this video for you guys. I think I'm going to do it. Me and Debbie. Because we want to get it out. So you guys have something to watch on Christmas Day or Christmas Eve. I'm just going to tack. I don't want to put it into... That's like 4 beads. And I can keep going. I want to keep going. When I start like that, it's hard to stop. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to come down here on the bottom and put 3 or 4 beads. Nice, nice, nice.
And we have our chromoly over here on the floor.
Yeah, we stocked chromoly, but we ordered a bunch more. So we got 3/4, 1 inch, 1 1/8, 1.5 inch, or 1 1/4, 1 1/2, and 1 5/8. They're a nice supply. So maybe, you didn't hear this here, but maybe there's a race car chassis in there for the future. At least part of one. Maybe? I'm asking you, Debbie.
Oh, I don't know. I don't know. What car?
I don't know either. We don't know. Okay, there's a nice little tack. Let's come down here and do a nice little tack. That's exactly where I want it. Okay, so that's it for the forward bars. So I bent the dash bar, and we didn't have, Debbie's busy with t-shirt packing, so we didn't get that on video, but it's nothing, just nothing complicated. It's just a straight bar, and I went ahead and put 2 bends in it. And I've got to notch it. Once you get it cut, it won't fit in my regular bend, notcher over there, because it's got to be held right in this curve. Because that's my curve is going to turn right into the down bar. But I also have this old dog. I haven't used this in a long time, but there's just multiple ways to make a notch, and there's just because you got a notcher doesn't mean it'll work. So this is an old mill that I do nothing with except a few tubing notches. So I'll show you. It's slow. I don't get in a very big hurry with it. Go to that mark, and I'll probably have to go a little bit more, but it's like everything else, I'd rather notch twice. So if we use 1 5/8, we don't have to have any corner gussets for this 60 650 Cert. If we go 1 1/2, you got to have a gusset. If you go 1 1/4, you have to have 2 gussets. Well, gussets meaning 1-inch tube put in a corner, like a 45 in the corner. The problem with that is you save a little bit of weight by going 1 1/2. I mean, it'd be hard to measure over that 1 5/8. You're talking ounces. And you save a little bit more if you went 1 1/4, but then you got to put all those gussets in, so you're not saving really anything. So one of the reasons for not doing them is because it's hard to get back there to weld. I'm going to open that up just a little bit. This old machine, the ways are so worn out in it that it actually walks. Come back for part 2. We'll do the windshield bar, we'll do the funny car cage, and we'll do the door X bars, and we can send this thing to Clint and see if he can make it go 6s on sick week. So that's close to half of the cage. My cage inspector's on her way over here. She just got up. She's a little bit stiff. What do you want? You want to go home? You ready to go home? When you go home, you got to bite the cats, though. So, all right, we'll go home in a few minutes. Anyway, that was about half of the cage. What a ham dog. And we're gonna quit right there. Probably won't get much done till after Christmas now. But the bones are here. That's really the bones of it. The funny car cage and what have you, the only thing that I do there is I got to make sure it's in front of his helmet, and I got to make sure it's wide enough for his shoulders. I don't know what I'm going to do with this mess. So that's not too hard to do. And the X bars, that's simple. It's a lot of welding, but not too bad to do, just time consuming. So we're getting there for Clint. Got to get it back to him as quick as we can so he can get this thing to Rocky Mountain Race Week. So be sure to check back for the second video where we do the funny car cage and those X bars, and maybe we'll get some video of Clint taking it back to Oklahoma where he lives, I think around Tulsa. So thanks for watching. We'll see you next time. And don't forget, even though it's too late for Christmas, it's not too late to order. We've got some really cool shirts. Alex has got her new stock, and my shirts are just killer. So we've sold a lot of them, and thank you guys for ordering those. It seriously helps out our Christmas. So,
and who else has a shirt?
Yeah, that ham dog has a shirt. Have they seen her shirt?
I don't know.
They really need to see her. So since the ham dog is insisting on being seen this video, which she's pretty good about that, you better show her shirt. So this is Mika Taylor. Get it? MT right here. Mika Taylor. And she signed it and put her paw print on it. So if you'd like to support Mika, she also has an Instagram page, but she doesn't post much. She's usually sleeping or bumping into us. But it's got ATR on the front, Mika Taylor on the back along. I think it's Mika. It could be Mickey Thompson. I'm not real sure. It's one or the other. So anyway, go have a look on Alex's webpage or her store. And I think we've got about everything. I don't think we're sold out of anything right now. So again, thank you guys for all the orders, and thank you for watching. We'll see you next time to finish this thing up.